Good evening, everyone. Let's try that again. Good evening, everyone. All right. Have you all had dinner yet? No? Did you go to Il Vicino this evening? Good, good. That's what I like to hear. So good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us once again for the third lecture in our lecture series. I'm Laura Griego. I'm the Director of Education and Volunteers at El Rancho de las Golondrinas, Santa Fe's premier living history museum. And before we dive in, I just want to give everybody a reminder to please join our friends this evening after the presentation at Il Vicino Santa Fe. They're open till 9 p.m. Mention Las Golondrinas when you order, and Il Vicino will donate 20% of your ticket to support programs at Santa Fe's best-loved living history museum, Las Golondrinas. Reservations are not necessary, and all orders in the restaurant or to go qualify for this donation. So please go enjoy some delicious food and show your support for Las Golondrinas. So welcome once again to the 2025 Winter Lecture Series, Speaking of Traditions. El Rancho de las Golondrinas has been hosting this lecture since 1999, and we are happy to partner with our friends here at the New Mexico Museum of Art in presenting this series. At this time, please remember to silence your cell phones. There will be a time for questions following the presentation, and at the end of the Q&A section, please start to make your way out of the auditorium. If you'd like to speak with our presenters or have any follow-up questions, please try to do that in the lobby or on your way out of the museum. We have to be out of here so they can close up by 7 p.m. So thank you all so much in helping us do that. Everyone here tonight can support both Las Golondrinas and the New Mexico Museum of Art by becoming members and/or volunteers. Visit our websites for details or join us on your way out this evening. It makes a really big difference to both of our organizations, and we really do appreciate it. For those of you watching this broadcast later on the Golondrinas live sessions, please post any questions in the comments section and they'll be addressed. Please visit our website and social media for details about our 2025 season. Please also subscribe to our monthly newsletter to get the most up-to-date information. We have a lot of wonderful things planned, and we look forward to seeing each and every one of you at our events this season. Tonight, we are excited to welcome not just one, but two of our citizen scientists who are extremely dedicated to the Leonora Curtin Wetland, the incredible 35-acre preserve located on the Las Golondrinas site. They are part of an enthusiastic group, each one with their own unique passions and expertise, responsible for monitoring a myriad of species, habitat changes, water levels, and much more. Because of their diligence, we now have over 1,000 documented species at this site. And that's what we're here to learn about this evening with Zach Carlson and Ann Hunkins. Zach Carlson was born and raised in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He graduated from the University of New Mexico and has worked in the nonprofit educational sector for the last 25 years in Texas, Colorado, and now New Mexico. He earned a CEA certification and an associate degree in CEA from Santa Fe Community College. Now, for those of you that are like me, I had to look up what CEA meant. It stands for Controlled Environment Agriculture. Zach has taught CEA classes for SFCC for the last 9 years, as well as worked for Energy Smart Academy, located on campus. Living in an environment like Santa Fe has shown Zach how essential water conservation, sustainable local food production, and winter greenhouses are. While volunteering at the Leonora Curtin Wetland Preserve for the last 7 years, he has reconnected with an understanding of nature and the threat it's under. Each week feeling more inspired to do more for our community and the species we share this precious land with. Joining him in his presentation is friend and fellow citizen scientist Ann Hunkins. Ann is a tracking and nature educator in Santa Fe who has intensively studied tracking for over a decade and holds a Track and Sign Specialist certification with Tracker Certification North America. Leading special programs at the Leonora Curtin Wetland Preserve, she helps guests connect with the rare, vital ecosystem of wetlands, reading the stories on the land when they learn to identify tracks and signs of animals who live there. Together, they make a strong, dynamic duo, and we are so grateful for their passion and expertise, as well as all their hard work as a citizen scientist. They're both also just really, really nice people. So sit back, relax, and let's join them on a journey to 1,000 species.
Good evening, everybody. It's nice to see you. I want to introduce Anne real quick. She's going to be talking a little later to us. So I want to make sure we introduced her right away so you know who came up later.
I'll be back.
So she'll be back. So first and foremost, I just want to thank Laura and El Rancho de las Golondrinas for this opportunity to speak to you about the wetland today. To begin a conversation, a lecture on Leonora Curtin Wetland Preserve, I must begin with the namesake, a woman named Leonora Curtin, who brought wisdom and caring for this land, a proto-feminist to many, and one who strived to learn about the nature around her. She was the first Santa Fe Garden Club president and the founder of the Spanish Colonial Arts Society, now called the New Mexicano Heritage Arts Museum, and who are doing some incredible exhibits to this day. In 1932, Leonora Curtin acquired the land that is now the preserve, as well as El Rancho de las Golondrinas, and in 1947, she published the Healing Herbs of the Upper Rio Grande, which was a book on the ethnobotany of this area. Leonora meticulously documented the herbal traditions and uses of the Spanish and Native American Southwest that had been passed down for generations. Indeed, this very book was also passed down for generations of households in New Mexico and continues to this day. The species that we see at the preserve were written about in this book, and it provides a detailed account of how these same plants and the people's home. Our relationships to plants in New Mexico and the romanticism of nature in Santa Fe would not be the same without her. She traveled throughout the Southwest to learn from those who knew more than her, and then shared that knowledge and brought that home to shape how she interacted with her own backyard. Indeed, I can find no better role model for how I now view my home in Santa Fe and the volunteer work that I have participated in at the Leonora Curtin Wetland Preserve. While I began my story, I realized this place we are talking about has an immense history, one that has been lectured on many times in the past, and many stories from this area may be lost forever. The history of this land is rich, and one that still has so much to share. The history with humans may go back tens of thousands of years. The shared knowledge of the species that use this land has gone back thousands. And our understanding of how to preserve a place or habitat or species has only been in the last 100 years. With that said, I want to acknowledge that indigenous people and Native American pueblos throughout New Mexico have a much more symbiotic relationship with the plants and animals around them. There was a balance and an understanding with nature that we as a larger society have lost, and we must strive to find that again. I encourage all of us to begin to look at our relationship with nature, and even this preserve is a microcosm for all nature, everywhere. Nature is our teacher, and we must once again learn to listen to her with love. And it is with that same love that hundreds of people have dedicated time and effort to the preserve in hundreds of different ways. I thought before we dive into all the work that these people have done over the last 50 years, that we first honor them by name and talk about a few of them. This is a long list, and it doesn't have everybody who's helped the preserve, and so I apologize if I've missed any name, because there were so many people who have brought the work and dedication that this preserve deserves. A few that I want to highlight just from this list, Mark Kaltenbach and Viola Fisher. The dock was named after Mark, and he was instrumental in the very beginning of putting together Leonora Curtin Wetland Preserve. They built the dock and bridges and the paths, as well as fenced it off for the burros. Viola Fisher was also a citizen scientist at the time and really helpful. I want to mention Bob Pennington, who is the founder of Agua Fria Nursery. I talked to him about what he remembers out the preserve, and he just said the Russian olive thorns. That's all that he could really recall from that. Bob Savinsky is on the list. He was a former state botanist and really instrumental in identifying some of the plant species that we see there. Barbara Fix, who's here tonight, I want to acknowledge her because she helped me with the history of kind of talking about these people that were before my time, but I definitely want to acknowledge. Just a few more. Molly Parsons was the former educational director at the Santa Fe Botanical Garden. She introduced me to the preserve, so I wouldn't be standing here today without her. Rocky Tucker does amazing bird tours at El Rancho de las Golondrinas and the Botanical Garden. Steve Carey was our butterfly expert. He has a book that he wrote on the butterflies of New Mexico, and anytime I have a butterfly question, he's who I reach out to. I also want to acknowledge Chris Chappell because he is in our citizen science group, but unfortunately was not there for the day we took this picture. He is a wonderful birder and an expert in birds and has his own company doing birding. So this is our current citizen science group as it is today without Chris. TJ Adams and Lucy Brennan, both amazing birders, and they've helped with a lot of the nest boxes that we monitor, as well as identifying species of birds. Ann Hunkins, who you just met tonight, amazing tracker. There's the amateur me in the middle. And then Silva and Marika have both been instrumental in documenting the plants at the preserve, as well as tracking phenology. I came home, let me start here, a little bit about who we were. Before I kind of started, we were really working with the Santa Fe Botanical Garden to have a place where we could have guides and docents and people who are really knowledgeable about the preserve welcome visitors and show them around and show them what made this place so amazing. They were also educators, constantly teaching people about the preserve. We've evolved a little bit. Our group now is focused really on ecology and tracking the species. We obviously want to get back to the guides and engaging the public, but even during the off-season when the preserve is closed, we're doing all of these types of things. So we're doing phenology and habitat support, as well as game cameras that we document species with. Now, who am I? Let me tell you guys a little about me. So I came home 10 years ago to learn about sustainability and advanced agriculture. In 2018, I was hired by the Santa Fe Botanical Garden with a grant through the Dancing Star Foundation to help survey and document the biodiversity of the preserve. The goal of the grant was to support dedicated citizen science volunteers and engaging the general public with the data that we had collected and what we have learned. The grant ended, as well as my position, a year after it started, but I couldn't leave. And I was dedicated to continuing the work as so many volunteers already have. So I am an educator. I've taught every age from age 4 to age 75. And I think one of the most important things you can do as a teacher, a good teacher, is to listen and to learn. And I always want to learn. Citizen science isn't for experts, even though we have some. It's for the people who want to begin to understand the world around them. And anyone can start. And if I can represent the scientific amateur and still stand with you lovely people, then please know that there is so much more to engage in with nature. The hundreds of thousands of species that are at the preserve and the 1,000 that we have documented have no voice. They have no way to tell us when they are hurting or threatened by the decisions we as Santa Fe community make. They need voices, and they need people to speak up for them and fight for them. My hope is tonight, my voice will be for them. So how do we do that? Well, by realizing what this work is for everyone. I know it's called citizen science, and I always had a little bit of an issue with that. We've addressed it before, but I consider it a citizen of the earth, no matter who you are, where you're born. So these are some of the projects that we've done at Leonora Curtin. We're doing nest monitoring and nest boxes. You can see we have a kestrel here poking out of one of our owl boxes. Even though it's an owl box, our birds will choose and decide whatever best works for them. But these were kestrels we had a few years ago sticking out of here. We have about 30 nest boxes that we support. They were originally just constructed by Boy Scouts, and our citizen science group cleans and monitors those for a national database. I want to mention phenology. Phenology is the tracking of cyclical events that can occur with species throughout different seasons and years. So it really gives us an insight into how climate change is affecting our environments, and it's a nationwide database that we can contribute to. The last thing I want to mention on this list is the biological soil crust preservation. Some people might not be familiar with biological soil crusts, but those are communities of living organisms that form on soil in arid and semi-arid ecosystems. It's an incredibly diverse species of organisms that form on the soil when it is undisturbed. So we have some of these critical areas at Leonora Curtin, and we really strive to protect them and teach people about what they are. A lot of people say New Mexico has poor soil, but the fact is the soil and the nutrient would be much higher if we understood how to coexist with these biological soil crusts. The preserve, if you've never been, is 35 acres at La Cienega, which is in fact the namesake of what is at the heart of this place, a cienega. An easy way to think of it is a wetland. However, it is much rarer because in the American Southwest, the environment is different and the soil is different. So we began to see a much richer biodiversity of species than anywhere else in this region. Critical habitat for our wildlife is a key component to this wetland, and 95% of cienegas in the southwest United States and northern Mexico are now dry and lost. This one is barely hanging on. I used to tell people that the water that comes up at the preserve is 10,000 years old, and this is what someone once told me. I have now learned that the water is between 25 and 7,000 years old, but no less magical. It also can be mixed with surface water, and this means our actions can have a detrimental effect to the water at this preserve. I wish I could talk about every single species we have identified at this preserve, because each one has a story and provides an insight into the magic of Leonora Curtin, even the invasive ones. Some of these photos that are strolling through here may be a little oversaturated, a little too artistic, but I say if you love something, make it look beautiful. So we can begin to look at a few of these species. Let's start with one. And just so everybody knows, I do not know Latin. I'm not going to do taxonomic names. I'm horrible about it. But let's start with this one, the only one. This is Lang's scud, Gammarus langi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This is the only one ever discovered in the world, and it was discovered at our little 35-acre preserve. A group of researchers from the University of Miami in Ohio collected rare scud found throughout the Southwest, including collecting specimens from the pond in the 1990s. We can think of a scud as an amphipod crustacean or a freshwater microscopic shrimp is how I tell people about it. A prominent biologist named Brian Lang was the first to collect the specimens from the preserve. Tragically, he passed away trying to save his dog in Bernalillo in 2017. The researchers who continued his work graciously named this scud after him. I was amazed to learn this fact. And I want to start this tonight because I believe it's so important to understand our relationship with nature and how we can save species like this one. I was told, and I hope this isn't true, But if there is the presence of fish in the pond where this scud was discovered, then it is most likely no longer there. I know in 2016 there were no fish in the pond, but around 2021, we did start to notice that there were koi and goldfish in the pond. Both of these have been identified. These fish can be introduced by people illegally dumping their raised goldfish, but there are stories also of fish eggs traveling on ducks into new ponds that may not have had them before. So we may not be the only culprit. I don't know which occurred at Leonora Curtin, but I now know we have these fish. Now, if you're a birder and want to see an increase in habitat for some of these fish-loving birds, then you may welcome these invasive fish to our pond. And I can understand that desire. All of these birds have been documented at the preserve. Piscivorous, there we go, piscivorous birds. My point being that we must try to continue to learn how to hold on to the preservation of the endemic species, even at the cost of benefits to other ones. Another prominent example of this relationship with invasive species has been with the Russian olive. Russian olive removal was a contentious issue when it occurred at a large scale in late 2017. 6 acres of this invasive species were removed from the preserve. And it's not an easy plant to remove. Not only does it thrive in poor soil conditions, but seedlings also survive easily, and it matures quickly. Russian olive also uses a lot of water, up to 75 gallons per tree per day. It also has large thorns and will send out runners if an herbicide is not applied to the stumps. 2 acres of the Russian olive remain at the preserve, and this will continue to expand without control. Native plant species can and have returned to these areas of removed Russian olives, and a large number of birds will thrive within the Russian olive habitat, and other species will consume its edible fruit. I rarely see any insects on the Russian olive, though, and this is one of my quickest indicators for what is and isn't a native plant, with some exceptions, of course. The last 2 species I want to look at with this conversation around non-native species and their impact upon this critical habitat are these 2. Perhaps our worst offenders. Russian knapweed on the left was introduced in the late 19th century to the United States and has spread throughout the Southwest. If you have ever heard of chewing disease in horses, this plant will cause it. It is also allelopathic, which is a fun biology term, meaning this plant produces chemicals that can inhibit the growth of nearby plants. So you know this plant is bad, and you put together an effort to remove it. Well, it turns out you can't have volunteers pulling this plant out either, because it also happens to have a potentially carcinogenic sap. There's a story out of Washington of a man losing fingers after tumors developed from pulling these plants out. Herbicide can be used as a control for this plant, but herbicide can also be damaging to some of our other plant species. There was an attempt, if I can turn the page, there was an attempt in 2000s to use goats to control the Russian knapweed. Carefully thought out sections of knapweed were fenced off to let the goats consume in these targeted areas. Unfortunately, due to miscommunications and the goats being dropped off without oversight as some workers went to lunch, neighborhood dogs heard the goats and chased them out of the penned off areas, and they went to work on the rest of the preserve for the rest of the day. The volunteers who worked so hard to protect the species of the preserve were devastated, and this event has come to be called Goatgate, or the Great Goatscape. Luckily, most of the plants that were consumed returned after a few years. We know goats will eat anything. This is another example of where our best intentions for the preserve are not necessarily the outcome achieved, and this mistake was made. Before we knew about the environment of a cienega, there was a successful planting of cottonwoods near the frontage road entrance of the preserve. But a true cienega should have little to no trees, as this can have a detrimental effect on the water table. So even though planting of the cottonwood was seen as a means for protection of the preserve, it had the opposite effect. The other invasive species on this is what I consider extremely detrimental to the preserve, and that's the American bullfrog. It's from the eastern United States, but has been introduced in the western part, as well as South America, Western Europe, and Asia. An incredibly resilient species, it can survive for weeks without water. And even if we removed every inkling of bullfrog in the pond at Leonora Curtin, they could just hop from nearby ponds and return quite quickly. The bullfrog will compete with our native frogs like the northern leopard frog, which should be at the preserve but is no longer seen. The American bullfrog also has the potential to decimate our dragonfly and damselfly populations, as it has a voracious appetite much like the goat and can consume almost anything. Bullfrog was brought to this region as something to consume, frog legs. Russian olive is also edible. I was surprised on my journey of learning about these species that a lot of invasive ones have been used as a food source. This should speak to our relationship with nature again, and where we are sourcing our food and what we consider food. I think it is important to understand the dynamics at play when we make decisions around removal or introduction of a species. Considering how critical this habitat can be, I look to the experts and the best intentions for truly protecting all the species at the preserve. We must trust science and the wisdom of people who dedicate their lives to learning the correct way to navigate these relationships with invasive species. Okay, now we can dive into my favorite part and start to talk about what we are seeing at the preserve and how we can support those species. Let's start with mammals. Just 2 weeks ago, we identified our 22nd mammal at the preserve. We thought we had gray fox, we assumed we had gray fox, but this is the first picture that we captured 2 weeks ago. It was caught on one of our game cameras. Now, one of our most critical mammal species at Leonora Curtin is that of the bobcat. I would like to invite Anne up to share a little bit about her work around the bobcat.
Great. Thanks. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, this is a picture by one of our volunteers, TJ Adams. This was in 2021 in the fall. This beautiful bobcat showed up and they just hung out together for a little while. I think that's probably happened to some of you with bobcats, because bobcats tend to live pretty well with close to humans. I don't mean like with. Probably some of you have had encounters with them. They're really amazing animals. They're super important in regulating prey, which also helps reduce parasites and diseases, in regulating prey such as rodents and, voles, mice, this kind of thing. I was actually very briefly involved in the 1990s with Leonora Curtin, and I was thinking, since then, I wonder how many bobcat generations have happened. So bobcats live about average of 7 years in the wild, but they breed every year. So I was just thinking, if there's one resident bobcat there that bred every year and had, let's say, an average of 2 kittens, that would be like 60 bobcats since the 1990s. So just to think about like how actually resilient they are, and they can breed more than once a year too. I'll talk about that in a minute, but let's go through these photos. I want to just say I'm a grad student at Prescott College and in environmental studies, and so I'm really interested in trying to figure out how many bobcats are here, who are they, how are they coming through. This is that same bobcat walking away when I'm calling this he got bored, I guess, and had other better things to do. So what I started to do, we've got like thousands of pictures of bobcat, was to look at their markings. Here you can see that there's kind of strong markings on the leg with this bobcat, on the legs, but not so much on the back. But then there's other bobcats that come along like this one, very different color, right? Also strong markings on the legs and not so much on the back, but totally tawny, much smaller bobcat, right? This is probably a young bobcat. This was in 2023. Another reason I say, besides the fact that it's kind of thin, that it's a young bobcat, is that this is what it's doing. It's he or she is hunting mice or voles under that boardwalk there, and that's pretty much what young bobcats do. They eat smaller prey all the time. Now here, finally, they did. 3 months later, they caught that mouse. And then just to look at different ones, look at this bobcat, look at that totally different pattern on the back. So you really can tell individual bobcats by looking at their patterns. This, I think, also is a young one. This was a young one in the same summer of 2023 as that one we just looked at. And at first I was like, I wonder if they're siblings. But it's also true that bobcats, when they are young, like a year old, they will disperse from their mothers, and they can travel up to 100 miles to find a new place to live. So we never saw this bobcat more than a couple times. So I think that this was a transient just passing through from some other place. Now this is obviously an individual that you could tell because something happened to what's called the tapetum lucidum, that thing that makes animals' eyes glow in the dark. So that's obviously damaged on the left eye of this bobcat. It's not necessarily, it might just be night blind. What I was reading about, it might not be fully blind in that eye, but that's another way you could identify individuals. Now, a cool thing I wanted to talk about is what the bobcats are doing. I was noticing these pictures of them sniffing the bench at the kiosk a lot. I was like, what are they looking for? What's going on? And then I started to notice this sort of behavior. And then more bobcats coming up and checking it out. And then more bobcats doing it again. And then coming back and checking out again. And what I finally realized is that this is, when you think about their home ranges can be 6 square miles to like 60 square miles. And they're just basically communicating with each other. That's the only, they might not see each other for months, but they can check out these scent posts. You can check it out too. In fact, other animals check them out all the time. And this is a kitten. We had a couple kittens 2 years in a row. Super cute. One thing I want to talk about, just real quick, I know my time's almost up here, but there's really interesting was that we saw way less bobcats in the years when the coyote pups kind of took over the preserve and were just all over the cameras all the time, having a really great time, obviously. And those were the times when we really didn't see the bobcats that much. And it's been documented that that does happen because they are, not so much because like one is fighting the other or driving it out, but because they are competing for the same prey, and coyotes are omnivores, so they're way more flexible in what they can eat. And so I'm going to have more data as time goes on. And if you have photos of bobcats at the preserve, send them to me. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anne, so much. I appreciate that. Here is a list of the 22 species of mammals that we have seen at this preserve. And I just want to highlight a few of those because these are really amazing creatures that have gone through our game cameras. The first one we have here is a mountain lion. Now, I don't usually share the date that we have seen these animals, and in iNaturalist, which is our main tracking source for keeping track of all these animals, they will actually obscure the location to protect these species from possible illegal hunting. So even though we may see a mountain lion or a bear at the preserve, we'll usually wait a year or longer to put that picture on anywhere public. And here is our black bear that we saw in 2020 on the cameras. And you can see another picture here. And then I wanted to highlight this mammal as well because it was such a treat to have a little visit from a porcupine coming up above. He stayed with us about half a year. He or she, I should always say that. So let's talk about some numbers with species. I want to start with plants. In 1993 or 1994, when the preserve used to be called the Leonora Curtin Natural History Area, a plant survey was completed by a group of botanists, horticulturalists, naturalists, and amateur plant enthusiasts. They canvassed all 35 acres. Back then, there were no paths or kiosks or bridges or the dock. Nothing existed. They had actually just finished the fence to keep the burros out. This initial survey was the backbone for the next 30 years of plant identification at the preserve. In 1998, a group of volunteers along with the Santa Fe Botanical Garden created an herbarium and some plant cards with photos and descriptions to aid visitors. In 2005, Janice Tucker undertook a meticulous task of cataloging almost all the plants with similar type cards for visitors. These would be shared by the docents whenever a visitor came to the preserve, and the plant database grew, and we still use it to this day. As we can see from this graph, since I started tracking this data, we've only discovered 20 new species of plants, as most of the work had already been completed by these amazing volunteers in the Santa Fe Botanical Garden. Our most recent plant discovery happened this last spring when we found common devil's claw for the first time near a trail. These plants provide an invaluable tool that we contribute data to every week. Two of our volunteers, Sylvan and Marika, track the phenology of several different species of plants. And by uploading this data to the National Phenology Network, scientists can use that data to understand climate change impacts, as well as desertification, plant interactions, and hundreds of other potential research avenues. 1 month into my new position at the Santa Fe Botanical Garden, I had no idea I would see one of the rarest plants that we've had at Leonora Curtin. It was wheel milkweed, and soon after I took this picture, the plant disappeared. I don't know if someone came and stole it, but we never saw this one again. This is one of 4 milkweeds that we have seen at the preserve, and I'm sure as some of you know, milkweed is a critical plant for our dwindling monarch populations. So there has been efforts in collaboration with the Institute of Applied Ecology to plant milkweeds at the preserve and see if we can't increase our butterfly populations, or specifically the monarch. We have showy milkweed, horsetail milkweed, and broadleaf milkweed. They have that very distinctive flower. All of the milkweeds have that same flower. And these are the monarchs that we've had one of the monarch we've had documented at the preserve. Again, I wish I could talk about all of the plants that we have, but I'm sure none of us would make it. So I just want to highlight a few in this slide. This picture on the right is Yerba mansa, an incredibly medicinal plant that we find at the preserve and really unique to the wetlands. It needs a very unique one. Needs a lot of water. And then the picture on the left is the Rio Grande cottonwood. That's a subspecies of the eastern cottonwood. And these trees you would expect to see at a preserve. Some of these are over 200 years old, and they're massive. If you ever go there, you'll see the massive trees. Those are our Rio Grande cottonwoods. I do want to highlight our Oenotheras. This is one of them. We have 9 species at the preserve. 8 of those are on iNaturalist with a picture. They include such plants as evening primroses and the velvet weed. The relationship between insects and plants is critical. And as these both provide the majority of food sources for any other species at the preserve. If I can support a successful and diverse plant system, I will see an increase in the biodiversity of insects. And indeed, we have documented over 30 species of butterfly and 87 species of moth. Our ability to identify insects could not be achieved without some of the emerging technologies that we have incorporated in them. One of those being iNaturalist, to help with incredibly small details that experts can distinguish one genus from the other. The other technology being blacklight and insect attraction methods, as well as more sophisticated cameras to perform macrophotography. Without these tools, I don't think we would have reached over 1,000 species. In fact, insects recently surpassed plants as the most diverse group of species at the preserve. As you can see from this graph, we have identified around 388 species of insects. A lot of these identifications are only at the genus level, as many of them would require dissection to distinguish the species. So to identify the insects, we do special trips at night with cameras and black lights. The bugs are instantly drawn to these spectrums, and we can identify species that we have not seen before. These are just a couple of examples from this last year. I love this moth because it almost has like gold flake on its wings. And then that's a water strider, a close-up picture of a water strider on the bottom there. And that's a white sheet, so you can't even see the threads, but when you get these types of cameras, you can really see the detail on that. Here's an example of the details we can achieve. This is a crane fly. Crane fly is a big insect, a little less than 2 inches. But I can get a front photo of this specimen, and then I can even get some more detail at this level. And this has really helped us with allowing experts be able to tell us what species we're documenting. We're also not experts, so mistakes are made, and that's why the second part of this identification involves accessing an online AI database and using existing experts who can access these photos and confirm or change identifications. Without this technology, it would take years to look up the research and confirm what species we have photographed. A few times, through this same technology, iNaturalist, our team has been contacted by researchers, one out of the Harvard University, who wanted me to collect samples of this species, a type of milkweed longhorn beetle, for a genomic study. I never found it again, though. And this species here, from a photo that TJ took, we were contacted by the USDA as they believe it's an unnamed species. Our group was able to collect samples and send them to the researchers, so this may be our second only one in the world at the preserve. So many amazing insects I would love to show, but this last one speaks to the unique relationships that exist. This is a hornworm who has been parasitized by a wasp, and these are the larvae of that wasp as they slowly consume the walking hornworm. But the worm itself will no longer eat. It's almost like a zombie. The last set of species I would like to look at is birds. And this is perhaps the most engaging species when first interacting with nature for any visitor. I remember the early days of not knowing any of them and maybe capturing a few non-blurry photos and then trying to identify them with the help of the internet. I also was astounded by the capacity and knowledge of some of our volunteers like Lucy and TJ and Chris, who can identify every bird by sight and sometimes with just a note or two of a bird chirp. Indeed, without these expert volunteers, we would not have surpassed 200 species like we have. There have been 563 birds identified in New Mexico, so this is a substantial amount just on these 35 acres. It's due to the unique habitat of plants, insects, and water that this preserve offers. eBird, which is the database to track that bird sightings, has become an essential tool across the world, and most serious birders are contributing to that data set. Another tool that I found invaluable as an amateur is an app called Merlin, where all you have to do is record in the app, and it will tell you which species it's hearing. I do confirm the recordings, though, because it can be wrong. The first bird recorded at Leonora Curtin on eBird, and this is where we are tracking all of this, is from 1998, and that was a black-billed magpie. We saw 4 new species of bird in the preserve in 2024, which were the fox sparrow, a yellow-bellied sapsucker, Lucy's warbler, and this yellow-billed cuckoo. Volunteers and visitors to Leonora Curtin Preserve have identified 23 species of waterfowl, 24 species of sparrows, and we've also been visited by 6 different species of swallows, or Las Golondrinas. Interestingly, we have identified 2 birds that were never seen by people, but ended up on our game cameras. The snow goose stopped by one morning to break the ice, and the common porwheel was captured by a game camera photo. Finally, I would like to look at one more graph. This is the total species count and how it is broken down. Besides birds and plants, all these species are tracked with the use of iNaturalist, so there's a permanent photo or sound attached to each species. I know there's a category here for other, and just to clarify on that, that's some species that don't fit within any of these other categories. They include some of the microorganisms that we've identified, as well as the roly-poly and centipedes. If I can convey anything tonight, it is that this place is truly sacred, and the preserve is the best teacher of all. There is always something more to learn, and we can practice these same principles in our own backyard. It's not only about conserving water, but we can also develop methods to recharge water on our land, rather than letting it flow down arroyos and drainage pipes. We can compost, we can feed our birds, we can feed our soil. And there's no such thing as yard waste, because it all gets recycled as nutrients. Don't make your backyard pretty with non-native plants. Make it pretty with biocrust and native ones. Convince our politicians to protect all of nature more. It won't be an invasive species that kills this preserve. It will be development and complacency. Okay, I'm done with my rant. And let's look at what we want to save. These are all photos of species at the preserve who are less than 1 year old, the babies. Let's protect them. So these are baby kestrel and baby cedar waxwings. We have mallard, baby mallards. It's a baby coyote pup. The kitten for the bobcat, a first-year common merganser, first-year dragonfly, first instar, I should say, and then the eggs of a stink bug are there as well at the bottom. This is also a juvenile black-crowned night heron that we saw a couple years ago. And I want to end on my baby hummingbirds. So thank you all so much. I am open to questions, and I would like to invite Ann back up to accept questions from you guys. Yes, thank you. Marian Baum as well is one of our critical volunteers and helps with it. Yes.
Ann, are you only studying the bobcats at the wetlands? What is the scope of your master's?
Oh, actually, my master's thesis is on badgers in the Bosque in Albuquerque. This is more of a volunteer thing because I'm just fascinated with bobcats. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely one of my endeavors on this was to buy photography equipment where I could capture this, and then I also ended up getting a microscope, and I did start doing some microorganisms identification. Sadly, I would get too upset as I slowly watched these microorganisms die on the slide. So I had to go back to it, but I need to get over that. Yes? I'm sorry, the species what? Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things we've noticed too is that sometimes you think something very innocent like bringing your dog along to the preserve is not a big deal. You know, you're gonna pick up the poop, it's not gonna leave anything. But these mammals will smell their scent and then they'll avoid that area. And so we'll see a reduction in the species that we're seeing just because somebody brought a dog through. Yes?
I'm curious, how do you get the photos? Do you guys just put the equipment out and wait for them to show up? Or do you sit and watch them? Or
Both, definitely both. Our game cameras are motion triggered, and then we go out every week and are trying to get new photos of any species that we possibly can. I don't know if you want to add something.
Yeah, sometimes we'll switch them to different locations based on what's happening. Yeah.
That's a good question. And it's a very complex answer. And I am not a geologist and don't have that capability to kind of really dive into the water. Obviously, we're in drought conditions, and so we can be impacted that. But because this water takes 7,000 years to kind of come from the Sangre de Cristos, you may not see those fluctuations that you would see with other surface water areas. I thought there was a question over here. Okay. Yeah, sorry. So Leonora Curtin is open during the season. I'm sure they have the exact dates when they're going to open. And you can just reach out to them as well. But from when you buy a ticket to El Rancho de las Golondrinas, you have access to the preserve from that side. Yeah, eBird is all accessible online. Anybody can go to eBird and look up Leonora Curtin, and you'll see every bird species that we've seen. And they actually do this incredible thing where they'll do a printable checklist. So it prints you a checklist of those birds, and you can mark them off as you see them.
And I was just going to say, talk about iNaturalist, you all do have a project.
Yes.
And that's a really great place for anyone to have that app. I think you have like 800 species listed on that iNaturalist project.
Yeah, iNaturalist has been incredible. I can't speak enough about how it's impacted my life and how I document these species with it. Yes.
What about fire? There's been a tremendous accumulation of organic matter that can catch fire. Early on, it was topical, maybe you should be able to throw a burn there. What about fire?
Yeah, I think learning about how critical fire is and the fact that some areas of New Mexico historically had fire every 30 to 60 years, it can be extremely beneficial. I think we need to be really careful with how we do that. And so I've heard of really small scale burnings, and I think that could be something that could be beneficial in terms of getting rid of all that kind of built up mass. Okay.
Are you going to try the goats again?
Never. No, I think the goats are forever done. I hope. Yeah. Yes. I think for the first time ever, we're going to do a city nature challenge with Santa Fe and a couple other cities. I know Laura has some of that information. I know I'm going to be doing a walk during that week to kind of highlight species at the preserve.
That's at the end of April.
Yes, the end of April. Yes. So, and I know that's why I kind of raised the fact that it was a contentious issue, because you did lose a lot of bird habitat, right? But we have seen native species pop up, and we are doing native species planting on a small scale. And there is that balance. So as much as there is certain areas that still have that thick kind of habitat for birds, I think that it is good to kind of address that balance and say, well, we can't take everything away. But at the same time, we really need to recognize what this invasive species is doing. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, so a lot of the kochia was taken out as well, and you'll have some of those areas with maybe degraded soil that will take a few years for native species to kind of rehold. But other areas like the southern side of that pond, we removed that Russian olive and golden currant just exploded. Our three-leaf sumac exploded, and so it's really amazing to see those areas that would not be able to have those kind of native plants. Okay, thank you all. Oh, one more.
How are the bees that now have impact?
Good question. You're talking about the western honeybees that they're raising? Yeah, I'm not an expert, so I don't know if that's necessarily having a negative impact or positive. We have documented a lot of different solitary bees, which are the native bees to this region. And so I don't know, I guess is my answer to that. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I think they're just in the midst of completing their volunteer training for El Rancho de las Golondrinas. So we're all tied into that. So if I have people who are specifically wanting to do Leonora Curtin work, I'm happy to take them and kind of show them avenues where we could really use help. And I didn't really talk about it, but anybody can get on our iNaturalist site and make phenology markers about plants that we've already uploaded, and that contributes to that data set. So even just sitting at home and on your computer, you're helping us with the phenology of the preserve.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not necessarily in response to that, but I just wanted to mention that for those who are interested, I'm going to be giving a tracking class in the fall, and I'm also going to be doing a presentation on tracks at the preserve next month as well. So.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Zach and Ann. Another big round of applause for them. Before you all head out, I wanted to just address a couple of questions that everybody was curious about. Leonora Curtin can be accessed once the season opens, same as our museum, Wednesday through Sundays. The hours on that are 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Access is generally through the Las Golondrinas side. You would check in through the museum store, you'd pay your admission, and the admission covers you for the entire day for both Las Golondrinas and the Leonora Curtin Wetland. If you have any mobility issues, things like that, just give us a call, send us an email. We're happy to meet you on the frontage road side and let you in and out of the gate. But as we learned tonight, it is a preserve. It's a super special place, home to a lot of really incredible species. So that's part of our protection plan to kind of manage the groups that go in and how they have access. And you know, we see people trespassing through the back gate and everything, and it really just harms the preserve and the species. So we're going to let you in. We want it accessible. So come through the museum side or give us a call. If you go to our website, golondrinas.org, there is a page dedicated to Leonora Curtin Wetland. On there, you'll find a list of all of the programming we have set thus far for our 2025 season. There are specialized tours. A couple of them are offered by Zach and Ann. So you'll get to hang out with them on a more one-on-one basis. It's by reservation, up to 20 or 25 people. We are participating in the City of Santa Fe Nature Challenge, and that'll be on April 27th. Zach is going to do a tour in the afternoon. The details are still coming together, but those details will all be available on our website as soon as we solidify that. And of course, if there's any questions, you know, just reach out to Las Golondrinas, and we're happy to answer that. And I'm the volunteer coordinator as well, so if you want to volunteer with us either at Golondrinas in history, or if you want to spend your time out at the Leonora Curtin, we'd love to have you come out and participate. So again, just reach out. Question? Our season starts officially June, is it the 6th, guys? Help me out. I think that first weekend of June, we start with our spring festival. We have bookend festivals. It's Spring Festival to Spirits Festival, June to October, but we are opening April 1st for private tours. So if you want to schedule a private tour of Las Golondrinas, what I call the historic district where all the buildings are, or if you want to spend some time at Leonora Curtin on a private tour, just go ahead and reach out. There's also a page on our website under tours where you can sign up right there online and make a reservation for a private tour, and all the details are there. June 7th, thank you. June 7th is officially day one, open to the public, doors open with Spring Festival. But if you want to come visit either site, prior to that, we're opening up here in April for private tours. So again, thank you all so much. Go have some pizza. Thank you, Zach and Ann.